Hi guys, hope you're doing good, and today I'm going to be doing a thrash metal guitarist tier list. Now, I've seen quite a few different tier lists on YouTube, but I've never seen a thrash metal guitarist tier list. And I thought, why not do one? Because I love thrash metal, it's probably my favourite genre of metal. Obviously I'm a guitarist myself, and a lot of these guitarists have influenced me a lot. And I thought it'd be quite a cool video to talk about each, and what how I would rank them really. And for this video I'm gonna choose the big 8, the big American 8, obviously Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, Slayer, Overkill, Testament, Exodus, Death Angel, and I'm also gonna include Sepultura and Kreator as like the biggest 10 thrash bands, you could argue, or the most well known. And how I'm gonna base my list, I'm gonna base it off firstly riffs, songwriting, technical proficiency, consistency, and my own opinion, because I think that holds a lot of weight for where a lot of these guitarists will go. And another little rule that I had for this is that the guitarists must have appeared on more than one album. So if they appeared on only one album, they will not count for this. So yeah, I hope you'll go on to enjoy the video, and without any further ado, let's get straight into it. So before we start, I'm just going to go through the tiers for the tier list. For most tier lists, you have S tier as the top tier, the absolute best of the best. A tier I've got as great. B tier I've got as good/decent. C tier I've got as okay, but also if I don't know them well enough, and there are quite a few guitarists on this list that I don't know because I haven't listened to those albums. And then D tier, bottom tier, I've got bad. But spoiler, I haven't got anyone in bad, because everyone on this list I don't think are bad guitarists. And they wouldn't be in the bands if they were bad, so I kind of just put that in there, but it won't be used. So yeah, let's get on with this, and let's start with Metallica. And obviously Metallica have had James Hetfield and Kirk Hammett pretty much since the beginning. Obviously Kirk Hammett joined for the recording of Kill 'Em All, but they've been there throughout their whole career pretty much. James Hetfield, I think in terms of his songwriting and riff writing, and as a rhythm guitarist, he is one of the best, and will be one of the best on this list, I think. But in terms of like recently, they've sort of really, they've had their ups and downs recently. So it's kind of difficult to judge James on, like, if we were doing just the first 4 albums, I think he would be in the A tier. But obviously it's come down. I have to average it out throughout his whole career, and my own opinion. I think he's an excellent rhythm guitar player. Leads not so good, but you have to sort of take that with James. He's just more well known for his rhythm playing and obviously songwriting, riff writing. So I'd put James at a B tier. Kirk, sort of similar for Kirk. I think from the first 4 albums, I think Kirk would have been an A, easy A, maybe even borderline S tier, because he was that good when he was younger. But nowadays, if I was to judge it on his guitar playing right now, it'd probably drop down to a C, maybe even borderline towards a D, because I think he's really regressed over the years. But I think when you balance it out, I think Kirk is also in the B tier. Next up, Metallica's old friends, Megadeth. Now, Megadeth have had a bazillion guitarists in their career, but the ones I'm going to focus on are obviously the ones that have played on multiple albums. So we've got Dave Mustaine, who's been there ever since. Chris Poland, that featured on the first two, and The System Has Failed. Marty Friedman, who featured on Rust in Peace to Risk. Chris Broderick, who featured on Endgame to Super Collider. And Kiko Loureiro, who was on Dystopia and The Sick, the Dying and the Dead. Now, firstly, Dave. I think Dave's an absolutely fantastic guitarist, and I feel like he's underrated. I think he gets a bit overlooked for the best guitarists lists. In terms of his songwriting, those riffs are so technical and crazy, and his lead playing as well is unbelievable. Back in the day, especially, he was frantic. He was a frantic player. Insane technical riffs. You can say that Megadeth have had a couple of down periods, but I think the good definitely outweighs the bad, and I would definitely put Dave Mustaine in A tier. Chris Poland next, and I've got to be honest, I've never really been a big fan of his solo style. I don't know, it's just something about it. It's very unique and very different, and I know he does take a lot of influence from jazz, and you can definitely hear that in his playing, but I don't know, there's just something that I've never quite clicked with his guitar solo style. I think he's a great lead guitarist, and I would definitely put him in B tier. Marty Friedman. Now, everyone will know how much I absolutely adore Marty Friedman and his style. Again, I think it's so unique and different, but it's just so majestic and is just absolutely fantastic. Especially on Rust in Peace and Countdown to Extinction, his guitar solos are out of this world. And yeah, in a way, it's kind of a shame that he played on a lot of the poorer Megadeth albums in the late 90s, because his guitar playing definitely deserved better than that. But yeah, despite all that, I'm still going to put Marty in S tier because he is just unbelievable. One of the best guitarists that has ever been in thrash metal. And yeah, just amazing. Chris Broderick next. And I very nearly put Chris Broderick in S tier because, again, I just think he's unbelievable. His technical proficiency is just outrageous, especially on Endgame. His guitar solos on Endgame are unbelievable. But again, I think the quality of albums that he played on is a little bit of a detriment, really. And in the end, I went with A tier for Chris. And last up for Megadeth is Kiko. I think Kiko's great. I really do. I don't really understand why he is no longer in Megadeth. I find that a bit weird. But the two albums that he played on with Megadeth have definitely helped Megadeth get a bit of form back. And even though I don't own the new one, but I still think it's got some fantastic songs, unbelievable solos. I think his influence was a bit more greater on the new album as well. But even Dystopia's got some excellent guitar solos, some excellent riffs. He definitely contributed and has helped take Megadeth back up a level, I think. And for that reason, I've got to put Kiko in A tier. Next up, we've got Slayer. And of course, Slayer have had Jeff Hanneman on almost all their albums bar Repentless, and of course Kerry King for all their albums as well. And this one was a bit of a tricky one because Slayer kind of get a lot of crap for their guitar solos and guitar ability, but honestly, if you listen to the albums, you hear the riffs and they are so crazy and technical at times, especially on the earlier albums. They are just so intricate and technical, and you have to really think when you're playing them riffs. So I might have graded them a little higher than some people might think. Jeff, I've gone with A, because I think Jeff is really underrated. I think he's a really, really great guitar player, or he was a very great guitar player. R.I.P. Some of his guitar solos were really unique and really interesting, and especially the riffs, some of the heaviest riffs, you know, that are borderline death metal at times, you know, really was a big innovator for the real extreme metal. And yeah, I think Jeff, out of the two, Jeff was the better guitar player. And Kerry King, I have put him in B tier. I think he's good. I think some of his guitar solos are a bit naff, but on the whole, I think he's a really good rhythm player, really good riff writer, really good songwriter, decent lead player. So yeah, that's why I put him in B tier. And last of the big four is Anthrax. And Anthrax have had Scott Ian pretty much since the start, all the way through. Dan Spitz on lead guitar from Fistful of Metal to Sound of White Noise. Rob Caggiano from We've Come For You All and Worship Music. And they currently have John D.I.E, but he's only featured on one album, which is a shame, because I would have loved to put him on this list because I think he's amazing. And if I could have put him on, I would have put him in A tier because I think he's fantastic. But yeah, he's only done one album, which is a shame. So yeah, Scott Ian. I've put Scott Ian in B tier. I think he's a really, really great riff writer, songwriter. I think his rhythm playing, he's got to be one of the best rhythm guitarists in thrash metal. Super consistent. Lead, he doesn't really do leads though. I mean, he does one lead on what's the song called, Madhouse, but that's about it. He doesn't really do leads, but yeah, he's a solid, competent, really decent rhythm player, so that's why I've put him in B tier. Dan Spitz I've also put in B tier because I've got to be honest, I think he's just a decent lead player. His guitar solos are never anything too flashy or technical. They're just, you know, they're just there. They just happen. They're good. They're decent. He's not a terrible player, but I don't think he's outstanding, let's say. And lastly, Rob. I think he's a great lead player. I think him and John D.I.E are probably the two best lead players that Anthrax have had. I haven't actually listened to We've Come For You All, but I have listened to Worship Music, and his solos on that album are ridiculous at times. Just a fantastic guitar player, and I would definitely put Rob in A tier. Up next we've got Exodus, and Exodus have had Gary Holt from the beginning pretty much, Rick Hunolt since just before they made their debut album Bonded by Blood, up to Tempo of the Damned, and Lee Altus from the Shovel-Headed Kill Machine to present. And yeah, Gary Holt, he is A tier for me. He is one of the best thrash metal guitarists. When you think of thrash metal lead guitarists, Gary Holt is one of the first names that I think of. He is just unbelievable. I think he gets a bit overlooked as well at times. Some of his guitar solos, especially the later guitar solos, some of them are he is just ripping. Great riff writer as well. He has got riffs. His riff catalogue is just ridiculous. He's got so many awesome riffs that he's not even produced yet. It's just unbelievable. So yeah, for me, Gary Holt, A tier. Rick Hunolt, I put in B tier. I think he's a good guitarist. But again, I think his solo style is a little bit strange at times. I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I think some of the guitar solos that he did back in the early days were better than some of the solos that he does on Tempo of the Damned. Yeah, I think he's a good guitar player. Yeah, that's all I can say. Lee Alters as well. I think he's a great riff writer. Obviously, he's the main guy in Heathen as well. His leads again are very unique, very different, and sometimes I like them, sometimes I don't. You know. So again, I put Lee Alters in B tier. Next up, we've got Testament, and Testament have had a couple of guitarists in their time, but not too many changes. They had Alex Skolnick from the Legacy up to the Ritual, and then of course he left in the 90s, but then come back for the formation of Damnation, and he's been there ever since. Eric Peterson has been there throughout the whole thing. He's basically one of the big main pillars in Testament. And of course they had James Murphy, and I wanted to include James Murphy because I think he's great, but also he did feature on Low and The Gathering. He did contribute solos for both, so I thought he'd be worthy to put on this list. Let's start with Alex Skolnick, and for me Alex Skolnick is S tier, and it wasn't even a debate in my mind. He is up there with Friedman as two of the greatest shredders in thrash metal. His technical proficiency is just absolutely second to none. Yeah, I just love his solo style. His guitar solos are unbelievable as well. For the most part, they're pretty long, but I haven't got a problem with that because he just shows off his prowess. I don't think he's too well known for his riff writing. I think he's more well known for his guitar solos, and that's fine. I just think he's got to be up there with one of the best thrash metal guitarists that has ever been in thrash metal. Just unbelievable player. One of my favourites. I just absolutely love listening to him play. And Eric Peterson, I've put him in A tier because, again, his riffs are unbelievable. Brilliant songwriter, brilliant riff writer, excellent rhythm guitarist, and he can actually play leads, and he is actually a pretty decent lead player as well when he wants to play some leads. Yeah, just an excellent player. James Murphy, again, I was debating putting him in S tier because I think he's really, really good. But in the end I went with A tier because, to be fair, he didn't really contribute too much to the Testament albums. He just basically done some guitar solos. I don't think he contributed much musically, so I thought I'd just put him in A tier. So next up we've got Death Angel, and Death Angel haven't had many guitar changes, so they have had Rob Cavastany pretty much all the way through. He's pretty much the main pillar of the band. They had Gus Pepper on the first 3 albums, and they've had Ted Aguilar from The Art of Dying up to present day. And let's start with Rob. I think Rob is a great guitar player. Again, I think he's a bit underrated. His solo style is really, really cool. I've always been fascinated by his guitar solo style. Very unique and different. Awesome riffs. One of these guitar players that are a great riff writer, a great songwriter, and great lead guitar player. And that reason only, he's got to be in A tier for me. Just a fantastic guitarist. Gus Pepper. I'm not really sure what he really did on the first 3 albums. I don't know whether he contributed much in terms of songwriting and guitar solos. I wasn't really quite sure because I've always associated Rob with being the main guy in the band, songwrite wise and stuff. So I wasn't really sure where to rank him, but in the end I just went with C tier. He's all right. He's a decent rhythm player. I wasn't really sure what else to do with him, to be honest. And Ted Aguilar, again, I think he's a really good rhythm player. I'm not really sure how much he contributes songwriting wise and stuff like that. I think he's done a couple of guitar solos, but not many. I think he's a good, decent player, and I put him in B tier. Next up, and last of the American bands, we've got Overkill. And Overkill have had quite the extensive list of guitar players over the years. Well, they've had quite an extensive list of lineup changes anyway, but Guitarists, this is quite a lot to get through. So, they had Bobby Gustafson from the beginning up to Years of Decay, and then they had Rob Canavanio from Horoscope to WFO. Same with Merritt Grant from Horoscope to WFO. Then they had Joe Comeu from The Killing Kind to Necroshine, and they also had Sebastian Marino from The Killing Kind to Necroshine. Then they have had Dave Linsk from Bloodletting to Present Day, and they've also had Derek Taylor from Killbox 13 to Present Day. And yeah, that is quite a lot to get through, and I have to be honest, quite a lot of these albums I haven't actually listened to, so it's a bit awkward for me to really judge these guitar players on not really listening to them much. But I have listened to quite a few Bobby Gustafson albums, and I think he's a really, really good, solid riff writer, guitar player, lead player. And I put him in B tier because I think he's really good. The next two, Rob and Merritt. I've listened to Horoscope, but I haven't listened to the other two albums that they played on. But the album that they did play on, Horoscope, I thought was a really good album, and they both were pretty good guitar players actually. Really good solos on that album. So I put both of those in B tier. The next two, Joe and Sebastian, I haven't listened to any of them albums, so I couldn't really rank them, so I just put them both in C tier. And lastly, Dave Linsk, I believe he's more of a lead player. I think Derek Taylor is more of a rhythm player. I haven't listened to a lot of albums that they played on, but I have listened to the latest one, Scorched, and I think they were absolutely top notch on that album. And I'll definitely have to listen to more stuff with them playing on them. Yeah, I think Dave Linsk, his lead work on that album is absolutely awesome. And so yeah, I put both of those in B tier for now. Next up, from Brazil, we've got Sepultura. And Sepultura haven't really had many lineup changes. Obviously, the big ones would be the Cavalera brothers no longer being in the band. But guitarist-wise, they haven't had many changes. So yeah, they've had Max Cavalera from pretty much the beginning, Morbid Visions to Roots, and that was when he left. They've had Andreas Kisser from Schizophrenia to Present Day. And of course they've also had Derek Green play rhythm guitar from Against up to, I believe, Rawback, or one of those ones in 2000s. But he's not really as known for his guitar playing, so I thought I will not include Derek on this. And also they had Gyro Grades on the Bestial Devastation and Morbid Visions releases, but again, because it was only one album, one EP, I thought I will not include him for this. So let's start off with Max Cavalera, and again, I think Max Cavalera is one of the best rhythm players on this list. He's not known for his guitar solos. I don't think he's ever done a guitar solo, to be honest. But some of the riffs and the songwriting are absolutely ferocious on them early Sepultura, and that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about Soulfly or anything else that he's done. We're talking about those albums that Max was on for Sepultura, and almost all of them are absolutely faultless and fantastic. And of course, I'm going to be doing more videos about Sepultura with their retirement throughout this year. But yeah, those early Sepultura albums have got some unbelievable riffs and songs. You know, the songwriting, riff writing, unbelievable. So yeah, Max Cavalera has to be A tier for me for his rhythm playing and riffs. Andreas, I think he's a fantastic lead player. I think he's very underrated again. He's got a really cool and unique style. Definitely brought the level up for the band when he come in for Schizophrenia. And yeah, those early albums, some of his guitar solos are absolutely fantastic. And of course, since Max left the band, he's basically been the main pillar for the band. And he's shown that he can write some really good riffs and he can write some really good songs, as well as having some pretty good guitar solos in there. I know they've had a couple of dips, but the recent one, Quadra, and their last album, Quadra, was fantastic. His guitar playing was amazing on it, and for that reason I'm going to put him in A tier. And last up for today, we've got Kreator, and Kreator have had quite a few guitar changes as well themselves. Starting off with Mili Petroza, he's been on all of the albums, obviously, because he's the main guy in the band. They've had Jorg Trzebiatowski on Terrible Certainty and Extreme Aggression. Frank Blackfire Godzik on Coma of Souls to Cause for Conflict. Tommy Vetterli on Outcast and Endorama. And their current guitar player is Sami Yili Cernio, who's been on Violent Revolution up to present day. I definitely was practicing those names. So let's start off with Mili Petroza. Yeah, really, really good rhythm player. I think his leads, however, are not very good, and that I think is apparent on the early Kreator albums where he was the only guitar player, and some of his leads are not very good at all, to be honest. I'm just not a big fan. I think his riff writing though is fantastic. Songwriting is really great. Consistency, kind of up and down. I haven't listened to all of the Kreator albums though, so can't judge too much on that. But for what he does, I think he's really good. Yeah, great songwriter, great riff writer, and I'm going to put him in B tier for now. Jorg, I think those two albums that he played on are my two favourite Kreator albums, and the main reason for that is that the fact that the guitar playing had gone up a massive level, and I think his guitar solos definitely brought the band up a level. Some great guitar solos and awesome riffs and songs on both of those albums. So for me, he's got to be in A tier. Next up, Frank Blackfire. To be honest, two of the albums that he played on I haven't listened to, so it's kind of gonna warp this a little bit. I have listened to Coma of Souls, and I think it's a great album. There's some great guitar solos and songs on it, but I can't judge too much on here, so I'm going to put him for now in C tier. Same for Tommy, because I haven't listened to those two albums that he played on, so it'd be unfair to judge, so I'm just going to put him in C tier for now. And lastly, Sami, I haven't listened to all the newer Kreator stuff, but I have heard bits and bobs, and yeah, he is a great lead player. A lot of people have praised in the past how great a lead guitarist he is, and I don't doubt that for a second for what I've heard, even though I haven't heard a lot of their newer stuff. What I have heard, I think, yeah, it's got some fantastic guitar solos, great riffs and melodies on them. So yeah, even though I've not listened to him much, I am very confident to put him in A tier. So that was my thrash metal guitarist tier list. I'd love to know what you thought of my list. I will put a graphic here so you can see the list in full if you've forgotten where I put people, because this video is massive. And yeah, I would have made this myself in Photoshop because I don't do the actual tier list thing. But yeah, I'd love to know what you think of this list, and I'd love to know what you think of these guitarists. Have I been kind to any of these guitarists? Have I been harsh to any of these guitarists? I'd love to know your list in the comments. And yeah, if you got this far, thanks ever so much for watching. I know it's a long one, but yeah, I really appreciate everyone who watches and comments and everything. And until the next time, keep thrashing.